My dad, Jacob Mensah, and Wendy Mensah, is the reason for my gang stalking. They blame it on weed, but it's deeper than that. Where the weed story falls short is that when I was young, until the age of getting gang stalked, I knew nothing about this evil program. I see other kids as young as pre-K taking part in my harassment, but when I was their age, I never was told about gang stalking or anything similar towards it, or this could be a reality, or even is a reality. The gang stalking went overt shortly after I told my parents that I smoked weed, specifically my dad. And really after that, a few months after, weird stuff started happening when I went out. Like, people would just basically be rude as fuck to me, harass me, death stares, staring at me, cutting me off, like, in traffic a lot more, trying to, like, almost even cause accidents on purpose where you could tell they're trying to crash into me. And just a whole much more stuff. That's just the tip of the iceberg. It seems like since birth I was marked to be an experiment, either experiment or sacrifice, probably both. They say stuff like I had seizures when I was a child, and when I was young they put me on pills for seizure medication. But looking back, I don't think I had any seizures. Because if now they're gonna put me on medicine for schizophrenia, put me on antipsychotics, then I don't need it. Why wouldn't they do that to me when I was, a child and I was more gullible and I believed everything they say and, thought trusting them was the right thing to do when it really wasn't. Yeah, if they could put me on pills now, then definitely back then they'd put me on pills that I would not need. It's clear all the signs add up to them being the main ones behind my programming and targeting, because basically just when I was a kid, like, a lot of weird stuff would happen. At the time I was just like, okay, that's weird, but it probably doesn't mean anything. It's just a coincidence. But now looking back, like, I see, like, the signs and everything like that. Like, I wasn't like a schizophrenic child, because, like, how, like, stuff is weird, because if weed would cause schizophrenia for me and I was predisposed to that, and they thought I'd get schizophrenia, then why wouldn't you tell me at, like, a younger age not to do any type of, like, drugs, and specifically, like, instill that mindset, like, don't do weed if it would lead to schizophrenia, and not after I tell you that I smoke weed, you're gonna now tell me that I shouldn't smoke weed because I may or may not get schizophrenia. They didn't even say I will definitely get schizophrenia. They say you may or may not get it. And then a few months after, like, weird stuff starts happening that has nothing to do with, like, schizophrenia. Because, like, how someone looks at you, if they're giving you, like, a death stare or sabotaging your shit, fucking with your work so you can't complete your work, that's not schizophrenia. That's complete fucking harassment and sabotage. That has nothing to do with any schizophrenia or anything like that. I lived my whole life not paranoid at all, but then as soon as I hit 19, a few months after I saw my dad, I smoked weed, and I started getting, now I'm, like, paranoid and deluded and schizophrenic and having delusions. Like, that doesn't really make sense. They say my uncle was also smoked weed and then became schizophrenic, but then again, if that is something that happens in the family, that you become schizophrenic after smoking weed, then wouldn't you tell your kids not to smoke weed a lot earlier than 19? After they tell you they're smoking weed, you tell them that? Because that wouldn't really make sense. Like, you tell them, if they're going to tell me diabetes runs in the family, don't eat too much sugar, why wouldn't they tell me schizophrenia runs in the family, don't smoke any weed or do any crazy drugs like that? So, obviously, like, there's just lying, and it has nothing to do with schizophrenia. My uncle was also a sacrifice, even if that story is even real. I'd never seen any pictures of him, never heard about him. They said he ended up in a mental institution, and till this day, that was like, what, 20, 30 years ago, to this day, he's still not out the mental institution, which, it's kind of crazy. How someone could do that to, like, their siblings or their son, child, whatever, that's just evil, and I'll never understand that type of evil. Yeah, so all the signs just basically, it leads up to them. Like, gang stalking, obviously, like, a lot of people take part in gang stalking. It's not something that people don't know about. People know about it. It's just people choose not to do anything about it. And that's a whole other story on itself, about how that's a slippery slope for society, and you can't expect good things to happen if you allow the government to get away with such evil stuff right in front of your face. But that's a whole nother story. But yeah, like clearly it just adds up to it. Because as a child, if you know, I wasn't, if it really was schizophrenia, then wouldn't have they said, I mean, if gang stalking didn't exist and it really was schizophrenia, they would have said something about it though. Like they would have said something about gang stalking as a child. Like, yo, like how do other kids that are like, you know, barely old enough to speak, you know, take part in gang stalking and shit like that, and you know, harass, stare at me, you know, and do all other types of crazy shit. But then when I was a kid, I never knew any of this shit existed, and it's just all the other weird stuff that be happening throughout my life, like teachers, friends, family members, and all this stuff giving me like kind of like sad looks. And then I'm over here confused, like, why are they looking at me like so sad? Like, you know, is it something that I did or like what? But then now it kind of makes sense why some of like my old teachers, friends, you know, and just people I've been around would be looking at me, you know, kind of sad and, you know, just looking at me with like sad eyes, like, you know, like something bad's about to happen in the future. And clearly this is what it was. So it kind of, yeah, it just all adds up to, you know, that type of conclusion.